Welcome to the Loving You interview series, conversations on self-love and self-care with well-being and holistic experts. I'm Rachel, your host, and I'm the founder of Under the Dancing Tree School of Sacred Dance and Healing. And today I have with me the beautiful Sialo, who is a tantric and sexuality expert, coach, facilitator. And she teaches bliss and pleasure to find peaceful and fulfilling ways to heal and nurture sexuality and intimacy related issues. I love that she is so much about pleasure for healing. So welcome, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Hi, thank you. So blessed to be here. So grateful for the opportunity to share about these things.
Yay. So glad to have you here as well. And I would love for us to begin with you introducing yourself and what you do. So kind of explaining, there might be some people on this series that maybe have never heard of Tantra, or sexuality is maybe completely new to them and this approach. So just talking into that a little bit would be wonderful.
Sure, yeah. So the favorite definition that I have of sacred sexuality or of Tantra is the integration of our sexuality with our spirituality. And this comes from a deep-rooted belief system that I hold, that sexuality is actually one of the modes to enlightenment, to becoming the highest version of ourselves. And this is very controversial in our societies, because sexuality has been one of the things that has been so shamed and so put down and so taboo. And that is one of the reasons that I think it is such an opportunity for us to up-level ourselves, because it holds some of the deepest roots about shame and judgment. And so if we can face those things and really transform them into empowering ways of being and ways of exploring our bodies and our interactions and our intimacy, this is how we can integrate, right, our spirituality and our sexuality. So it's a very, very powerful way, going into our depths of what we're capable of feeling. And especially, we're talking as two women identifying people, female identifying, who probably, I think both of us have a strong sense of feminine energy, of divine feminine energy. And that's a huge part of this conversation too, is what type of energy do I want to cultivate in my body? Right? How do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to present myself? And what does that look like? How do I integrate my sexuality into that? Right? Because a lot of us have been taught, especially with religious upbringings and these types of things, a lot of us have been taught to really cover ourselves and protect ourselves, and that showing our feminine beauty is kind of a scary and vulnerable thing, or maybe not kind of, maybe extremely scary and vulnerable to share our beauty with the world, right? To let people see it. Now, how does that happen? Like, how do people respond to that, right? It can be very tricky. So these are the topics that I go into. They have a lot to do with self-expression and a lot to do with nurturing kind of the wounded child inside of us that's really scared of these kind of sexuality topics.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And also yummy.
So yummy, juicy.
Yeah, and so important, to women. And I was talking in my last interview with Katie Holland about the Me Too movement, and how this has really come to kind of a really open conversation, an open platform now that, maybe before it was a bit more hidden, but now it is just out there, and it's a perfect opportunity to go there and to receive the, all of the healing that can come from going to that place. So yeah, super excited that you're doing this work, and so grateful as well that that you are there, doing this with women, because it's so valuable and it's so needed, most definitely. And you can imagine, as a belly dance performer and teacher, as one of my branches, that it's very in your face a lot of the time, and it's something that comes up a lot, especially with my clients and students as well. So I would love for you to share with our audience about your self-love and your self-care journey, because so many people come to what they're doing, you know, because it's been important on their path, and really our experiences, you know, kind of create our message, don't they, in a way. So what does self-love and self-care mean for you personally?
It's such a huge topic, right? Yeah. So it's changed so much over the years, and this is something I was having a conversation yesterday about this, that there's such a drastic change that happens in us often. We often have this feeling that uh, I'm so different from one day to the next day, you know, let alone 1 year to the next year. And so what my practice has looked like has been so drastically different over the years. And this practice, I think for me, the most poignant part of it, that, you know, is the most supportive for me, isn't about what it is that I'm doing. It's way more about the intention that I'm setting, and also about the follow through that I'm practicing. And again, as a feminine bodied person, follow through and discipline and these types of things are so uncomfortable, right? Like, it doesn't really feel like it's flowing. Like, to actually show up on my yoga mat every morning for some sort of practice, it's like, oh, that's so much commitment, you know, do I really want to follow through with that? But for me, that piece of choosing myself every single day, choosing to do something that feels good for myself every single day before I go to work, before I am interacting with people, right? That has been one of my biggest pieces of self-care, is really aligning myself first thing, right? And setting myself up that way, so that when I show up now, when I present myself to other people, to the world, to my clients, I'm showing up from that place of wholeness and supportedness, because I've already tapped into my support systems, right? And so what those support systems are have changed so drastically. Of course, they adjust all the time, and it's kind of like choosing pieces. Like I've got a bowl full of berries in front of me, and I'm like, which one do I want today? Right? Okay, maybe one of this and one of this, and then trying that on for the day and seeing how it feels. And again, another feminine bodied thing is that we often don't have the same craving from one day to the next day, right? And so if I try to do the same thing every day, it gets quite boring for me, right?
Yeah.
And so I might practice to do one thing every day for a while in order to really go into a specific modality, or to learn something specific to see how it feels in my body. But I often need to have this adjustment and this kind of buffet style with my self-love practices, because of the contrast of what I'm feeling and what I want that day, right? It can be so variant.
Yeah, so much
Yeah,
about being adaptable and having allowance, you know, and
yeah,
listening. So much
yeah.
there. mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the compassion of that, you know, really
mm,
having compassion with myself for that. And this has been a huge piece for me, is the self-judgment that comes up when I don't do it the way I think I'm supposed to. When a teacher has told me this is what's going to help you and try this out, and then I try it out and I'm like, you know, I liked it for a week, but now I don't really like it anymore. And meeting that with compassion and saying, it's okay to change my mind about what feels good today, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I find this, I mean, still with myself a lot, but so many women that I meet, that we have the highest expectations for ourselves. You know, they may be lower for everybody else, but for ourselves, we set them so high, you know, and if we don't meet those expectations, it kind of almost this perfectionism, you know, that we have to
Yeah.
be doing it right. And, you know, and we have to be doing this and have to be doing that. And we
Right.
place these on ourselves. And, you know, we can be our biggest critic along with that, you know, when we don't meet our own high expectations.
Yes, definitely.
So I would love for well, this opportunity with you, you know, with your knowledge about sexuality and tantra as well. This is, I would say this is still a topic that, even though there's a lot of talking, you know, around sex in the media and abuse, certainly now, there's still not so much positive conversation and talking about women's sexuality, women's desires, and really having this out in the open. You know, she's still very much a vehicle or a you know, kind of an object. And I would really love you to talk into, you know, how really kind of opening up to even discussing and talking and then exploring our own sexual needs, sexual desires, can actually be an act of self-love and self-care.
Yeah, definitely. So this kind of started really slowly for me, as I think it does for most people. It's kind of like you have to dip your toes in. Some people, right? Sometimes we dip our toes, sometimes we dive right in. But for me, I needed to dip my toes a little bit. I came from a place that was extremely repressed sexually, and there was no opportunity in my upbringing to express myself sexually in any way, you know, by the clothing that I was wearing, by the way that I presented myself, certainly by language, right? We don't talk about those things. And that, you know, has a multitude of issues, of course, and this feeds into the issues that we have as women in culture of needing to protect ourselves because we haven't educated ourselves. Right? We don't know for sure what is okay and what's not okay because we haven't tried it out. We haven't practiced it in safe environments. We haven't talked about it with people who are maybe in different places than we're at. We tend to talk to other people who are in the same place that we're at rather than people who are able to kind of adjust our thinking about it a little bit. So the lack of conversation is such a huge deal, right? It affects us so much to have this type of repression. And repression is a version of trauma, right? A lot of us have trauma. A lot of us have, you know, physical trauma of having received something that we didn't want to receive. But a lot of us have trauma too in this very kind of underlying way, this hidden way. We don't think about it as trauma, but it is, to repress ourselves, to hold back, right? Something that's so natural to us, something that is actually really powerful inside of us, our sexuality, right? So, so powerful, a powerful energy. It is the source of our creativity. It's the source of our self-expression. It's the source of our pleasure bodies. It is so powerful. And so many of us repress that. And this is a very common thing for women in general, right? If we're talking about that, that we kind of are told in our society that it's normal to not have a lot of a sex drive as a woman. It's normal to kind of not really want it as much as the man does. If you're in a heterosexual relationship, that's the stereotype, is like, oh, the men want sex, but the women don't. And it is complete bullshit. It is not accurate, right? Women have so much potential inside of them of this sexual energy. And this is such powerful, potent energy. So if we can start tapping into it first by having conversations like this, thank you so much for the opportunity. And also just inside of ourselves, right? So that's kind of the next step in what most people are practicing, is to practice it within themselves next, right? Or first, if you want to say that. And to actually explore inside of our bodies what it is that feels good for us, right? And then to express that, beginning, you know, after I felt kind of comfortable inside my own body, to begin to express that and to show it through the way that I'm dressing, or the way that I'm speaking, or how I look somebody in the eye. Right? These are sexual expressions. And it's a way of nurturing. We're talking about self-care and self-love. It's a very specific thing that we're loving on and nurturing here, right? And the more that we tap into it and nurture it and open it, meet it with this compassion to really soften ourselves, soften the parts of ourselves that were traumatized, right? Soften the parts of ourselves that are hiding and that are scared to come out, right? Really nurturing those things. Yeah. That is, to me, such a called for thing right now in our self-care practices, and one that is so often bypassed because there's so much trauma and shame and judgment there for most of us. Most of us have deep wells of these feelings wrapped around our sexuality. So if we decide to go into it, we have to be ready to face these things, right? And when we're called to, oh my gosh, it's such a big moment to choose to allow yourself to show up in the world with your sexuality present. Yeah.
And I think it's good to remember that we don't just have our own trauma, our own experience, but that of woman that has been for thousands of years. You think about the generations and the generations that we've almost inherited. We have all of this, and it's a really, really courageous act to self-love and to self-care. And there is all of this, like I said, not just our own. So it might feel overwhelming.
Yes.
That there is so much, but it's remembering that, we are totally in this together. We are all women, and we can, we're all experiencing the same things. You might think, these things are really alien, or this is so deep, I can't even access it. There's so many other women, like yourself, that people can reach out to in communities as well, that that are working through this now, and we have this amazing opportunity now, that hasn't been available before.
Yes, absolutely. And with technology, this is so crazy too. We have access to ancient teachings that you used to have to go to Tibet to learn, or to India to learn. And now you have them at your fingertips by a course online. It's so crazy that we have this information, this ancient wisdom right at our fingertips all the time. There's so much available. And then the community aspect too, which is continuing to grow, right? So many people are starting to understand that these things are really important and starting to show up for the conversations and for the practices, and the sisterhood that forms around these things when we together choose to support each other in what we're doing, right? And to open ourselves to the love that's available to us, right? And because of the technology of the internet, we have so much of it available to us, so many people that have trained, and so many people who have explored these ideas in their own bodies, and we're so supported.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage people to go out there and explore all the different ways, because as unique as we are, sexuality is so unique. Everybody is different. And I was reading something recently about the difference between arousal and desire, and I found it fascinating. And obviously the approaches, we're talking about pathways to self-love, or the pathways to arousal and desire, are unique and different for every single person. And again, it's about all of these expectations, and just all of these ideas. And where do these ideas come from that have been projected onto us? The social media, porn, history. But I'd love for you to talk to people about ways that maybe they could start exploring or listening, actual practical tools that they can use, to start listening, what is my desire and how do I find it, and especially because that can be something that people think, okay, well, I would need an hour in private where nobody else knows, and I have to do this with this tool or that tool, or what comes out of Ann Summers over here. I don't know if you have that, but there's so many different ways. So what would you encourage? What would you say to women that just want to begin to finding what works for them?
So again, there's so many different options, and that is why it can be really overwhelming for people when we start and trying to understand which are the pieces that work for us. And to me, a lot of this process is about the exploration. It's like trying something on and seeing how it feels. And I do, when I'm first starting with somebody, this is one of my favorite ways to begin the process, is just to begin really simple things that you already do. You already get dressed every day, right, Rachel? Most days. Maybe not every day for me.
Oh, we were just saying that before, that I look like I'm naked, but I'm not.
Yeah. So when I'm getting dressed in the morning, if I'm becoming more intentional about this sexual energy that I have, and I'm starting to cultivate it and starting to express it, I can tap into this in very, very simple ways throughout my daily process of things that I'm already doing. And this is what I call, you know, the tantric lifestyle, the sacred sexuality lifestyle. It's not about doing very specific practices. For me, and you know, those practices are important and I teach them as well. But it's also about living your entire life in a way that fuels that and that supports this exploration and this expression and this you know, holding that you have in your body now. Because as you cultivate sexual energy, you're beginning to hold this strength inside of your body. Now, how do I support that in my day-to-day practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorites is just, how am I getting dressed today? How am I getting dressed today? How do I clothe my body in a way that's going to feel really nurturing and that's going to really like cultivate and support this sexual energy that I hold inside of my body? And if I look at my wardrobe thinking about this as my intention for getting dressed and not about what are people going to think or what am I used to wearing, most of us just do what we're used to, right? We're so used to patterns, our habits, our neurological pathways are very strong. And so just to question it first and to ask ourselves, what would actually feel really good to wear today? You know, and I put on this big necklace, even though it's 9 a.m. in the morning for me. I'm like, you know what, this feels really good today. I'm going to wear that. And it adds something. Yeah, it does. It changes something. I have now, you know, this is a very grandiose language, but this is what happens in my head when I get dressed. It's like, I am a goddess. I believe myself to be a goddess. I choose to be a goddess today. I choose to channel goddess energy, whatever that means to me. And how I dress is I direct example, a direct channeling of that energy, right? So I choose to dress in ways that nurture that, that support that, and it changes how I feel. Another simple thing, you know, lots of us are taking selfies and sending them to our friends or putting them on social media. And this is a very powerful way to express yourself, right? Now, how are you doing that? What's the intention that you're doing behind it, right? And what are you wearing? You know, the clothes that you're wearing, what kind of environment are you in? These things are very important for us, especially as feminine bodied people. The natural inclination for somebody who embodies a lot of feminine energy is to pay attention to the external expressions, like our environment. What is our environment like? What's my room like? Right? And if I believe that my room is an expression of what my internal world is like, well, I better adjust it to make sure that it matches what I want my internal world to look like. So I tidy that thing up every day, right? It's very important to me. And it's important to me to have some essential oils on my bedside table ready for me to rub on my heart every night if I need it, because I need to nurture this part of me that's really scared, you know, when I express my sexuality to the world and somebody says something about how I'm being, you know, too much this or not enough that. I need to nurture myself to make sure that I'm meeting these feelings that arise, the reactions to how I'm perceived, meeting them with compassion, right? So there's all these little things. And to me, there's so much about supporting right? Whatever it is that supports this goddess energy is, you know, where I'm at right now. But in the past, it's also just been sensuality or beauty or love, however you want that to be, whatever it is that you're most called to and your version of what your intention is, right? And to cultivate that now. The other one that is like foundational for this work and for so much work is breath work.
Mm. Yeah.
Because if I view my sexuality or any kind of issue, any block that I'm working on as a boat, and I view my breath as the river that is carrying the boat, and if I don't have breath moving through my body, if I don't have the vital life force of my body, if it's not strong, if it's not flowing, then guess what? The blocks aren't flowing either, right? So to practice breath work every morning is also like foundational for me, essential for me personally, breath work. Yeah. And this is where the discipline comes in, because it can be so frustrating to say like, oh, I have to do this thing. And then the rebellious part of me says, oh, that's not necessary. I don't have to, right? As soon as I'm told I have to do something, I think that it's not necessary anymore. So to show up every day and to practice something and to choose to do it, this is key for me, to choose to do what feels good, not the version of it that you were taught or the version of it that's right, but the version of it that feels good for you. And so then you show up on your mat for something that you actually like every morning, right? So breath work to me, even just, you know, the most basic forms of it are increasing our capacity, right? How much air can you hold in your body, right? How big of an inhale can you actually take? How long can you hold that inhale for? Right? And then how deeply can you exhale? If you can dig down, 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 down into the root of your belly, all the way down into your sex organs, and you can exhale all of the tension and all of the stagnant old energy, even the conditioning, if you can exhale and allow this natural process, our bodies naturally want to let these things move out of our bodies, but we have these holding patterns of holding our breath and holding tension and holding tightness in our chest, right? So lots of chest opening exercises to open the heart center, and then these big inhales and exhales, any type of breath work, really. I mean, there are specific ones that I teach, but any type of breath work will do the same thing of increasing your capacity so that things are able to move. And again, doing it in ways that feel really good to you, like, ooh, wow, I'm alive. Oh, that feels so good. That's sexual energy, right? And this is the thing for me, is always paying attention to what feels good. And I don't mean the initial craving of what we think feels good is often our conditioning, right? It's like, oh, I like to get up and eat my leftover cake for breakfast. That's conditioning. But the deeper level is actually, I really like to make a smoothie with cherries and chocolate in it, you know? And those deeper layers are what I'm tapping into with pleasure, right? If we can choose in everything that we do throughout our day, but it's definitely in our very first things that we do in our day, if we can choose what they are based on what feels the best to us, then we are starting to train our brain to trust ourselves, to trust our instincts, to trust our body, our body's guidance system, you know, the nerve endings. We're literally learning to trust our body and how she speaks to us, right? Yeah. So
And
does
it's
that answer your question? I kind of go around.
no, it's all really good stuff. And I think that I really hear what you're saying, and we get so much in patterns and habits again of what we should be doing, you know, and so much so that we just we can't hear what's underneath. And I
unaudible.
thought, yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting what you were saying about the breath, because I know, like, you know, from my experience with facilitating dance healing, is I will see people like their mouths are closed, and I'm like, I'm breathe, and they're like, I haven't been breathing for the last 5 minutes. You know, and they're like,
Yeah.
because they're trying so hard. And as women, we try, we're always trying. And actually, and it's wonderful, the difference, you know, when I share with women that kind of the connection, yeah, between the throat and the mouth, and with our yoni, or if you want to call it. And when one is tight and locked, then the other is as well. And actually, just by opening the mouth, you can feel your whole opening. And if you really start to, even if, yeah, you, like you said, just start really small and just start listening and feeling into your breath, and you'll notice how many times that your jaw is locked, in all situations. And it's almost like this trying, or this kind of like, yeah, it's almost like, you know, when you, I don't know how to put it, but you know, like when you go to do something, you kind of go, you know, it's like that pulling in, that kind of that effort, yeah. And it's amazing, like working with any kind of sacral or womb energy benefits the throat, and the throat, you know, and vice versa as well. And they're so intrinsically linked, you know, and it can be really powerful, you know, just to begin breathing, and actually just feeling how nice it is just to breathe.
Yes.
You know, when you suddenly consciously breathe, you're like, yeah. And just even just taking one breath, you know, is a really good place to start, and that feels good.
Yes. Yeah. I say 3 breaths first thing in the morning. That's your first homework, right? That's what I say to my first is 3 breaths. Anybody can do that, right? You can handle that. And even that, it'll very quickly open something inside of people, because even just 3 breaths, we start to see such drastic changes, because as a practice of a daily practice, we start to build, right? It's like every day I've added this layer of what this support is in my body, and the capacity that I have in my body, and it builds, and it does make such drastic changes over time as we build it, right? And then that happens where people start to say, oh, it feels really good. Yes, it does. Because this is such a natural thing to your body. This is your literal life force. So of course, to tap into it and to allow the support that is so naturally available to you is so luxurious and satisfying. And I love your point that the effort piece is so relevant, because we so often feel that it does require this masculine effort of like, I do something, right? I have to go to the goal. I have to like force it to happen. And to allow it to just be natural to us instead, right? To just, it feels good, you know, to give ourselves that opportunity really to accept the reality that pleasure is natural to you, and that it is so easy that it happens in something as simple as your breath. And that by choosing to sit down intentionally for 30 seconds and take 3 deep breaths can change so many things. It's kind of like so many people feel like it's just too good to be true. It's too simple to make a big difference. But it is so foundational, right? Our breath gets into the very core, the very root of whatever it is that we're dealing with, whatever emotion is arising, whatever fear is arising. The breath has the capacity to take that away and to move it through your body within 2 minutes, right? We often get stuck in these things, this feeling of shame or of frustration or whatever, we get stuck in it for sometimes years. And the breath has the capacity to move it through your body within minutes. So if you can build up this foundation that you have in your body of flushing things out just by practicing the strength and the capacity of your breath and feeling how luxurious it is to do that, something so natural to you. It doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't take any effort. It's natural to you. Your body has a natural way of creating pleasure. The only thing stopping it is our blocks and our resistances and our fears, right? It's so natural to us. It's such a gift.
Definitely. Yeah, and thank you for the reminder, because I can feel myself breathing more deeply as you're talking. I'm like, remember to breathe. But you know, it's so essential. It's what we're only alive because we're breathing. It is our life force, and this is what it's about, you know, being alive and being fully alive, you know. And we were talking in another interview about kind of like life and death, and this fear of death. Well, without our breath is what sustains us. It what keeps us connected to the earth around us, what keeps us in this body, and it travels through our body, so it deeply connects us. There's so many. It's not just breath, you know. It's not just breathing in and out, in and out. We can dismiss it, as something. Oh, I just do that all the time. You don't even think about it. But there's so many deeper levels there, definitely. Deep breaths. Letting it flow.
And scientifically, there's so many pieces there too. Like even just one slow exhale has the capacity to change your nervous system, right? To take you from, to take you from the flight, fight, freeze response into rest and restore. Just one slow exhale. Like it's so powerful.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's something deeper there as well about kind of the giving, receiving. And as women, you know, we're so used to giving, and breath is receiving.
Yes.
It's taking in breath, and it's receiving that as a gift, and something that's providing and nourishing us. And there is so many blocks to receiving within woman and the feminine, you know. And I wonder if there's
deeper. Yeah. That's such a huge one. Yeah. Really common for people to say things like that and to feel that your own pleasure, our own pleasure is like not that important compared to dealing with other people's stuff. Like, you know, I have a friend breaking down today. That's more important than my breathwork exercise. You know, it's like instinct for that thought to happen in my brain. That I'm supposed to take care of other people before taking care of myself. And receiving is such a giant topic and so relevant. Thank you for bringing that up. That's so relevant, because if we don't feel that we are able to receive, if we aren't able to receive, then there's a massive block already, right? So that's one of the first ones that people have to deal with and really face. Am I receiving? Because a lot of us think that we are, even though we're kind of at like the tip of the iceberg level version of it. And there's so much more available to us than we even can fathom, right? The abundance of the universe is just so giant. And what we tap into for most of us is just this tiny, tiny little piece of what's available to us. And then the rest of it is available, but we have these resistances. And one of the most common one for women is this idea that there's other things that are more important, that taking care of other people is more important than receiving ourselves. And this is so important to me. One of my favorite ways to express it is to say that if you are not able to receive, then you actually aren't able to give either. The flow of receiving and giving is like this cycle, right? It's this circle. And if you suddenly have half of the circle missing, if you're not receiving anymore, then the circle isn't happening, right? Then we just have this give thing happening. And this is where we get drained. We start to feel tired, deflated, kind of like you know, eh.
Mhm.
That's my way of expressing that. That feeling is so common, so rampant in our society because of this resistance to receiving, right? Even in
Mhm.
simple things like our breath, right? Receiving in a daily practice of getting up in the morning and taking 3 deep breaths. It's so simple, but we don't prioritize it because we think other things are more important,
Mhm.
right? And this is the conditioning. This is the uh, long-term woman wound, right, around receiving. This is a lot of motherhood wounding that we've received. Even if I'm not a mother, but I've received this through my mother, and I tap into it through my sisters who have children as well. One of the deep mother wounds is this belief that we have to take care of other people before we take care of ourselves, and that taking care of ourselves is like a side thing when we have time, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. So to begin the process of creating, you know, we talk about manifestation with sex a lot too, with sex magic, right?
Mhm.
Combining the ability that your sexuality has to manifest reality, right? To
Mhm.
change your physical reality based on using your pleasure as that portal into manifestation. But the very first thing that has to happen is receiving in order to make that happen,
Mhm.
right? You can't manifest something out of nothing. You have to receive something first. It's like the cup
Mhm.
has to be overflowing, right?
Mhm.
And the paradox of it is the overflowing cup, right? So if I have a cup inside of my chest and I receive to fill the cup, and then there's an overflow and I can offer it to other people, the the opposite of that is also true, that there's an emptiness inside of, you know, the feminine energy. The emptiness of the womb is the literal void, right? And that's the home space as well, the yoni home space, the void, the emptiness. And that
Mhm.
emptiness, what that means to me is that because it's always at empty,
Mhm.
there's never any sort of actual lack, because there's always this constant flow through it,
Mhm.
right? Because it's empty, because it's a clear vessel, right? Container, the vessel is constantly moving through it, always things moving through it. And the very first step of receiving whatever you want is giving too,
Mhm.
right? To say, okay, I really want somebody who's able to offer me this. The first step is to offer that to somebody else.
Yeah.
So there's both sides to this, the giving and the receiving, right? But it requires both to create the vortex.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I remember I had a client that came to me once, and it was about abundance, which comes up a lot. And I said to her, okay, what if you asked, say, I want to receive £100 million, and you said, okay, I'm going to receive now £100 million, and then they sat there and waited, and then I was like, okay, well, what conditions have you put on that? Are you willing to receive everything? The fact that you might not receive it now, but you might receive it in 10 years' time. You might receive that £100 million, not in money form, but in a different kind of contribution, or might you receive that by losing your job, by
Mm-hmm.
having a new relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
all of these kind of fixed ideas we have about kind of, okay, well, I've made my request and I'm going to get it how I want it. And there
Mm-hmm.
is so much about kind of the giving can be the complete surrender to, all potential possibility. And the giving can actually be trust as well, complete trust.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, definitely. I love that.
Mm. Yum. And there's so many things that we could talk about, and I feel like we could go on for hours. This is such a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really encourage people to, if they're curious about any of this, or any of this, has brought something up, triggered stuff, or you're just curious or you're interested, then below this video I'll be putting all of the links to websites and Facebook and Instagram so you can reach out, you know, and ask any questions if you have them. But before we finish, I would love for you to share with our audience like your number one, like absolute top self-care, self-love tool that you just kind of default, but you always know just really, really nourishes you, you know, and it could be anything, you know, whatever it is. Your number one thing for you personally.
Yeah, I already spoke on it a little bit, and it's very vague, but I'll try to narrow it down. It has something to do with channeling goddess energy. It's like choosing to see myself in the light that I want to see myself in, right? And it's a practice of stepping into that ability, that calling, really, of being, of embodying divine feminine energy. So the way that I did this in practical sense, the way that I did this a couple days ago with a photo shoot, right? To be seen, to be captured in feminine energy, in goddess energy, to dress myself that way, to play I was in a river, to play in the river that way, right? So it's like a tapping in to my higher version of myself, right? So in self-love practices in general, again, this can just show up in so many different forms depending on the person and your personal preferences. But being captured, being seen is a really big one for me. So photography is a really big one, modeling, and also just dressing nicely, feeling good in my body, and going for a walk, right? Or having a conversation with somebody, to be seen, right? To have somebody see me for the goddess energy that I am, that's so powerful to me. It's like taking it from my own experience and beginning to extend it outwards where other people can see it, and so it feels like a deeper level of expression, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and often those most vulnerable places can be our most empowering.
Of course, yes.
Oh yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that you have today. It's been really, really amazing having you here, talking about all of this, and, you know, opening up this conversation that is so important and that just needs to be kept being had, you know, and
Yeah.
that needs to, just it needs to explode, orgasmically explode all over. Definitely. So so thank you so much for your contribution today, and for being you and being here and sharing all that you have. I'm really, really grateful and so thankful.
Yes, to you as well for hosting, for providing us this space to have these conversations, such important, potent conversations. So grateful for you.
Oh,
Thank
you're so
you.
welcome. Yeah, and all those links are below underneath this video, so do go and check Sialo out and all the things that wonderful things that she's doing in the world. So I shall see you all soon. I will see you in the next interview. So thank you and bye.